immediate horror. The old sedan rattled over the last stretch of gravel road, kicking up dust that glittered like static in the late afternoon sun. My destination, Blackwood Creek, was less a town and more a collection of weathered houses huddled against the encroaching forest, all of it overshadowed by the immense, dark shimmer of the Blackwood River. I'd driven 3 states to get here, trading the ceaseless hum of city life for the promise of quiet, solitude, and perhaps a semblance of peace. The online listing had promised a rustic cabin with a view of the water, a place where I, Zara, a graphic designer by trade, could finally escape the ghost of my past. I arrived eager for the silence. I found dread instead. The first hint of unease wasn't the town's insular gaze or the way the shopkeeper, a woman with eyes like polished river stones, stared a moment too long when I mentioned my cabin was right by the water. It was the silence of the river itself. On maps, it looked vibrant, a wide artery of water cutting through the wilderness. In person, it was a profound, unnatural stillness. No babbling, no rushing, just a slick, dark surface that reflected the oppressive green of the pines and the heavy gray sky. A local, an elderly fisherman whose face was a road map of sun-creased wrinkles, saw me gazing at it on my first evening. He cleared his throat, spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the parched earth, and said, "Best keep your thoughts to yourself. Around that water, girl. Some things here better than others." The casual warning delivered with a chilling seriousness clung to me like the damp mist that rose from the river each morning. My cabin was charmingly ramshackle, perched on a slight rise overlooking the darkest bend of the Blackwood River. The first night I unpacked by the light of a single bare bulb, trying to ignore the chill that clung to the air despite the summer evening. I was desperate for a fresh start, a clean slate after the accident, the one that had left my best friend Maya in a coma, and me with a guilt that gnawed at my insides like a persistent rodent. I'd seen the exhaustion in my family's eyes, the hushed conversations when I entered a room. Blackwood Creek was supposed to be my exile, my penance, my chance to heal. But peace never came. Not really. It was on my 3rd night, just after midnight, that the first true horror began. I was sketching, lost in the intricate lines of a new design, when a sound floated in through the open window. It wasn't loud, but it was profoundly wrong. A voice, or rather voices, multiple, ethereal, and singing. The sound was like water flowing over polished stone, yet it carried an unsettling resonance, a harmony that was both beautiful and utterly mournful. It was coming from the river. I froze, pen suspended over paper. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew, with an instinct more primal than logic, that this was what the fishermen had warned me about, the river wives. I dismissed it as local folklore, quaint superstition. Now the sound felt like a cold, wet hand gripping my chest. The harmony intensified, rising and falling, weaving together a melody that spoke of unfathomable age and sorrow. It wasn't human, it was something else entirely, something woven from the very fabric of the river itself. A sudden, sharp chill invaded the cabin, raising goosebumps on my arms. It carried with it a faint, almost sweet, earthy smell, like overturned soil and something else. Something indescribably ancient, like stagnant water that had seen too many seasons. I pulled my thin cardigan tighter, my eyes fixed on the window, where the song seemed to drift in on the wisps of rising mist. My breath hitched. The air shimmered faintly outside, a distortion in the darkness just above the river's surface. I wanted to slam the window shut, to draw the curtains, to hide from the impossible melody, but I couldn't move. My curiosity, a fatal flaw I'd always possessed, held me captive. I crept closer to the window, drawn by the haunting beauty and the terrifying mystery of the voices. They seemed to swell, to invite, to beckon. My name, Zara, seemed to weave itself into the melody, subtly at first, then growing clearer, elongated, whispered by the liquid voices. Zara. My past trauma, the guilt over Maya, the constant burden of anxiety. It all felt amplified, magnified by this unearthly chorus. Was this a manifestation of my own fractured mind, finally succumbing to the isolation? Or was something truly out there, something tangible and malevolent, finally reaching for me? The humid air in the cabin grew heavy, thick with the unidentifiable scent. My eyes, wide and unblinking, peered into the darkness beyond the window, searching for a source. And then, as the voices reached a chilling crescendo, I saw it. Just a glimpse. 3 figures, dark and indistinct against the black of the river, standing on the water's surface as if on solid ground, their long, flowing hair indistinguishable from the mist. Their faces were obscured, shadowed, but I felt their gaze, cold and ancient, pierce right through me, and I knew, with a horrifying certainty that chilled me to my very bones, that if I listened any longer, if I acknowledged them, my nightmare would truly begin. Build up. Atmosphere, unease, and foreshadowing. The singing faded as abruptly as it began, leaving behind a silence far more terrifying than the melody itself. The humid air in the cabin remained heavy, tainted by that ancient, earthy scent, like drowned soil and something else, something that spoke of things that had been lost and found in the river's depths. My heart still hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but the immediate panic had given way to a cold, creeping dread. The memory of the 3 figures, standing on the water, lingered in my vision like a burn. My cabin, a place I'd hoped would offer refuge, now felt like a transparent cage. I spent the next few days in a fog of unease, every sound from the river, every shift in the wind, sending a jolt of fear through me. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a byproduct of stress and isolation, but the smell persisted, a faint, clinging odor that permeated my clothes, my hair, even the pages of my sketch pad. And the silence of the river, once a simple lack of noise, now felt pregnant with unseen life, a vast, waiting entity. The whispers of the locals returned to me, clearer now, less like folklore and more like desperate warnings. They don't like to be disturbed, old Mr. Abernathy, the grizzled gas station attendant, had mumbled, his eyes darting towards the river, especially not after dark. My own background felt like a magnet, drawing this darkness to me. I had always been drawn to water, finding solace in its vastness, its calming rhythm. After Maya's accident, my fascination intensified, becoming an obsession. I'd spent hours by the city's polluted river, watching its murky currents, finding a strange kinship in its silent flow. Perhaps this river, the Blackwood, sensed that vulnerability, that unspoken longing, my grief, my guilt. They were open wounds, and this place seemed intent on probing them. My fear was deeply personal. I wasn't just afraid of dying, but of being lost, subsumed, just as Maya had been lost to me. Subtle oddities began to punctuate my days. I found small, smooth river stones, arranged in precise, unnatural patterns on my porch steps. Triangles, spirals, shapes that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. My old antique compass, a sentimental gift from my grandfather, started spinning wildly whenever I was near the riverbank, its needle refusing to settle on true north. I'd see fleeting reflections in puddles on the road that weren't mine, glimpses of wavering, elongated figures, only for them to vanish when I focused. Were these warnings? Invitations? Or was my mind, frayed by grief and isolation, finally unraveling? The tension in Blackwood Creek was a palpable thing, a taut wire stretched between the town and the river. The locals, initially reserved, became openly wary of me. Mrs. Albright, who ran the general store, would stop sweeping whenever I entered, her gaze fixed on me with a mixture of fear and pity. "Still living by the Blackwood, dear?" she'd asked one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "Some folks say it calls to you when it wants to." Her husband, usually gruff and silent, would often be seen walking along the riverbank in the early morning, not fishing, but simply staring at the water, his shoulders hunched, as if burdened by a secret. His face, when he turned, was etched with a profound, almost ancient sorrow. Their odd behaviors amplified my unease, fostering a deep-seated distrust. They knew something. They were part of this, willingly or unwillingly. The mist from the river became a constant presence, thicker than any natural fog I'd ever experienced. It crept into the town, coiling around lampposts, obscuring the familiar outlines of houses. It muffled sound, creating an eerie, profound silence that amplified the sound of my own footsteps, my own terrified breaths. And within the mist, I swore I could sometimes hear it, a faint, almost imperceptible hum, like a distant continuation of the song from that night. It was barely there, a whisper on the edge of hearing, but it was enough to make my skin crawl, enough to make me glance over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. The cabin's old wooden floorboards started groaning at night, not just with the usual sounds of settling, but with a deliberate creak, as if something was moving slowly, heavily, just beyond my sight. The light from my bedside lamp seemed to flicker and dim without cause, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and twisted into monstrous shapes. I would lie awake, listening to the impossible sounds, feeling the cold spots move across the room, the oppressive presence building, layering normal life with something profoundly unnatural. The psychological tension was relentless, a quiet dread seeping into every pore. I was a trespasser in a place with ancient rules, and the river wives were making it abundantly clear that they were aware of my presence, and perhaps they were finally ready to acknowledge it. Part 3. Climactic Moment. Terror Unleashed. The quiet dread that had woven itself into the fabric of my days in Blackwood Creek finally snapped. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, except for the fog. It was thicker than ever, a suffocating, milky shroud that swallowed the town whole. The sun was a distant, bruised orange behind the pall, casting an otherworldly glow that made every familiar object seem alien. The air was heavy with the river's acrid scent, now stronger, sickly sweet, like decaying water lilies, and something else, something vaguely metallic. I felt a relentless pull towards the river, a desperate urge I couldn't explain. I found myself at the riverbank, drawn by an invisible thread. The water was unnaturally still, flat and black beneath the swirling mist, reflecting nothing. It was colder here, a biting chill that bypassed my layers of clothing and went straight to my bones. The silence was absolute, broken only by the erratic thumping of my own heart. I squinted into the fog, my breath pluming into the frigid air, searching for something. The whispers of the townspeople, the unnatural stillness of the water, the strange river stones on my porch. It all culminated here, at the heart of the Blackwood River's mystery. And then, a sound. Not a song this time, but a faint, rhythmic splashing, coming from the very center of the river, where the fog was densest. It was too soft to be a fish, too regular to be anything natural. Splash, splash, splash. It sounded like something waiting, slowly, deliberately. My blood ran cold. Then, from the swirling depths of the mist, forms began to emerge. 3 of them, just as I had seen that first terrifying night. They were indistinct at first, like tall, slender trees swaying in an unseen breeze. But as they drew closer, the outlines became horrifyingly clear. They were impossibly tall, gaunt figures, draped in what looked like long, flowing gowns made of dark, silken weed and shimmering scales. Their hair, impossibly long and trailing, seemed to writhe like kelp in an underwater current, even in the still air. Their faces were still obscured by shadow and mist, but I could feel their presence, a crushing weight of ancient, primal power. My mind reeled, grasping for a rational explanation that simply wasn't there. Hallucination? A trick of the light and the pervasive fog? But the chill was too real, the scent too visceral, the presence too undeniable. The line between real and unreal didn't just blur. It was as if a veil had been torn away, revealing a horrifying truth that had always lurked beneath the surface of this quiet town. The world around me seemed to warp. The trees on the bank twisted, their branches elongating, reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground beneath my feet felt soft, yielding, like marshland, even though I was on solid earth. The central figure, taller than the others, raised a hand. Its fingers were long, delicate, tipped with nails that gleamed like polished oyster shells. It beckoned, and from its mouth a single word emerged, not sung, not whispered, but somehow felt in my very mind, a voice like the grinding of pebbles on a riverbed. Come, sister. And as that word resonated, I saw my reflection in the black, glassy surface of the river. But it wasn't my reflection alone. Standing directly behind me, almost merging with my form, was a 4th figure. Gaunt, draped in flowing shadows, its long, dark hair indistinguishable from my own. Its face was still obscured, but its eyes, when I saw them, were familiar. They were my eyes, but dark, hungry, and ancient. And it was smiling. A wide, unnerving smile that stretched beyond human bounds. A chilling realization struck me, colder than the river itself. This wasn't just happening to me, this was part of me. The trauma, the guilt, my longing for lost connection, it hadn't just drawn them here, it was pulling me in. Was this a curse? Had Blackwood Creek, had the River Wives chosen me for something unspeakable? Was I going mad? Or was I becoming one of them? The 3 figures on the water began to wade towards me, slowly, deliberately, their steps making no sound on the water's surface, only the faint, rhythmic splashing. Their arms, long and slender, reached out, their fingers beckoning. My reflection in the river, the 4th figure behind me, also reached out, its ancient, smiling eyes locked on the approaching wives. The river's smell intensified, filling my lungs, sweet and cloying. I could feel an undeniable pull, a cold, persistent current dragging me towards the water. And as their outstretched hands neared the bank, reaching for my reflection, I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that if I didn't break free, I would be lost to the Blackwood River, and to them, forever. Resolution, twisted ending. The pull towards the river was immense, an unseen current trying to drag me into the cold, dark embrace of the Blackwood. The 3 figures, now mere yards from the bank, their shadowy hands reaching, seemed to be drawing strength from my terror, from the very air around me. My reflection in the river, the fourth river wife that mirrored my every move, stretched its gaunt hand out, almost touching the beckoning fingers of the primary figure. My mind screamed, but no sound escaped my throat. With a desperate, primal surge of adrenaline born from sheer terror, I broke free. I stumbled backward, away from the river's edge, away from the reaching hands and the chilling smile of my own distorted reflection. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. I simply ran, scrambling up the muddy bank, through the dense, fog-laden trees, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. The silence of the forest was a temporary mercy, broken only by my ragged breaths and the frantic thumping of my heart. I half expected to hear the rhythmic splashing or the mournful song echoing behind me, but there was nothing. Only the persistent, cloying smell of decay clinging to my clothes, my hair, a constant reminder of what I'd seen. I made it back to the cabin, slamming the door shut, fumbling with the deadbolt with trembling hands. I pressed my back against the rough wood, gasping, eyes wide and unblinking. The cabin was exactly as I had left it, mundane and familiar, yet it felt utterly alien now, tainted by the horrors of the river. The immediate threat had receded, but there was no peace, only a hollow, echoing emptiness where my sense of safety used to be. The encounter had not resolved. It had simply retreated, leaving behind a wound far deeper than any physical injury. The lingering questions were a relentless torment. What were they? Why did they appear? What did they want with me? And the most terrifying question of all, what was that reflection? That fourth figure with my eyes smiling anciently. A horrifying truth began to solidify in my mind, cold and unforgiving. The river wives weren't just external entities. They were a manifestation, a parasitic force tied to the very essence of this town, and perhaps to the very essence of human sorrow. The final twist when it arrived was insidious, creeping in like the river mist. I noticed it first in small things. A faint shimmer in my peripheral vision, gone when I turned my head. The way water tasted different, sweeter somehow. Then the dreams began. Not nightmares, but visions. Of cold, dark currents. Of faces beneath the surface, distorted and weeping. Of long, flowing hair, indistinguishable from riverweed. And always, the faint, mournful singing. Not from outside, but from deep within my own mind. The ultimate revelation came when I went to the small, cracked mirror in my bathroom. My reflection looked back, tired, haunted, but undeniably me. And then, slowly, imperceptibly, my eyes began to change. The pupils seemed to dilate, to deepen, until they were no longer brown but bottomless pits of black, like the very depths of the Blackwood River itself. And as I stared, horrified, my own lips, in the reflection, began to curve into a faint, unsettling smile. Not my smile, an ancient, predatory smile, devoid of warmth or humanity. It was the smile of the fourth figure I'd seen in the river, reflected behind me. I was not just haunted by them, I was becoming them. The town's warning, never speak to the river wives, wasn't just about avoiding contact. It was about avoiding their gaze, their call, their insidious infiltration. The people of Blackwood Creek, the ones who avoided the river, who kept to themselves, whose eyes held a profound sorrow. They weren't just survivors. They were the ones who had fought it. And the ones like Mr. Khan, with his empty eyes and unsettling smile, they were the ones who had lost, the ones who had already become hosts. My survival of the direct encounter had been a hollow victory. The river wives hadn't left. They had simply found a new vessel. The psychological scars were deep, raw, bleeding into every waking moment. The paranoia was no longer a feeling. It was a reality. Every sound, every shadow, every fleeting reflection held the promise of their return, of their complete takeover. I was tethered to this cursed place, my fate intertwined with the ancient, dark waters of the Blackwood River. I was not safe. I was merely a temporary reprieve, a temporary host, living with the horrifying knowledge that I was slowly, inexorably becoming one of the river wives myself. Final takeaway, chilling moral or whisper. The silence in Blackwood Creek is no longer just the absence of sound. It's a living, breathing entity, a constant reminder of the insidious horror that permeates this town. The trauma of Maya's accident, my relentless guilt had carved an opening in my soul, a wound the river wives found and exploited. I learned a terrible lesson here, one etched into my very bones. Some places demand more than you can give, and some warnings are etched in the very fabric of the earth. I tried to escape my past, to find solace by the water, but instead, I found something far older, something that fed on my loneliness and transformed my grief into a grotesque mirroring. My survival feels like a lingering curse, a slow, inevitable transformation. The silence after my encounter with them was the loudest sound of all, a roaring void that confirmed not their departure, but their permanent inscription into my being. I still live in Blackwood Creek. I cannot leave. A cold, constant current pulls at me, a spiritual tether to the river. Every night, the moon casts its pale light on the water, and I feel an ache deep within me, a longing that isn't my own. I avoid the riverbank, but I can no longer avoid its presence inside me. The subtle changes continue. The increasing coldness that emanates from my skin, the faint fishy scent I occasionally catch on my own breath, the way my voice sometimes drops to a low, melodic hum, mimicking the mournful song. And the townspeople. I understand them now. The hushed tones, the averted gazes, the profound sorrow in their eyes. They aren't just wary, they are living testaments to the river's slow, unrelenting claim. I see Mr. Khan sometimes, standing by his mailbox, his eyes like black pools, his lips curved in that unsettling, ancient smile. He doesn't look at me, but I know. He sees it in me. The faint shimmer of scales beneath my skin, the glint of the river's dark depths in my eyes. The other night I woke to a distinct, rhythmic splashing from the river. I went to my window, my body moving without my conscious will, drawn by an irresistible force. The fog was thick, obscuring everything, yet I could see them. 3 dark figures, standing on the water, their long, flowing hair indistinguishable from the mist. They raised their arms, beckoning, and as I watched, my own arm, without my command, slowly lifted to mirror their gesture. A whisper, both alien and terribly familiar, rose from the river, carried on the damp air, weaving into my mind. "Welcome, sister. The water awaits. I am complete, but I am not safe. My fear has merged with something ancient, my loneliness consumed by a chilling sisterhood. My true horror isn't what they took from me, but what they made me. And as the mist rolls in each night, carrying the faint, mournful song across the darkened town, I sometimes catch my reflection in the dew-kissed glass, and I see not Zara, but the 4th river wife, her eyes black and knowing, waiting for the next soul to be drawn to the water, waiting to sing the next one home.